A live debate, all part of our special coverage on Britain's in-out referendum. So, Eve Irvine, handing over to you.
Hi, welcome to Live from London. It's 20 to 9 here, local time, just over an hour to go before polls close here on this referendum. 46 million voters eligible, a record number of people registering there. All eyes on turnout. We don't expect any results until early Friday morning, but to give us a bit of an insight as to how the reasons people might have voted one way or another, we have with us in studio Mr. Stanley Johnson, your chairman for Environmentalists for Europe, and clearly with the Remain campaign.
Yep.
You're also, of course, the father of Boris Johnson, who is campaigning for the other side of it.
I'm a former MEP as well.
Former MEP, so you can give us all the angles. At the other side of the table, we have Sir William Cash, a Conservative MEP for the Leave campaign.
Member of Parliament, and House of Commons.
For the Leave campaign. Again, at the other side, we have Lord Roger Liddle. You're with the Policy Network, chairman of that now, formerly EU advisor to Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair. So you can give us further insight. And finally, last but not least, Mr. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, you're the spokesperson for Poles in Britain, the Polish community that wants to leave the EU. So we should get a bit all elements in this debate. Mr. Johnson, let me perhaps start with you. Given that your family seems to represent the consensus across Britain at the moment, it's pretty much 50-50. Who's going to be happy?
Well, I'm in a rather conflicted situation, actually. Yes, I want us to win because I powerfully believe that Europe has done a lot of good things in the field I've been involved with for about 40 years, the environment. I think it has done some things. It makes a lot of sense to work across borders. And of course, other ways of working across borders, not just in the EU. That's always not claiming unique capabilities here. But for me, I have a real personal interest in this issue. But I've got to say, you're perfectly right. On the family side, I think my son Boris has actually set the argument alight. He has put on the table some really, really important issues. And I think the whole country has benefited from that.
So do you think he'll be happy tomorrow morning?
I don't know.
William Cash, you think your side will be
There's a lot. Well, look, we don't know is the answer, and I'm not going to enter into a kind of guessing game. But what I will say is that getting that referendum, I set out the Maastricht referendum campaign in 1990. And through the 1990s, we campaigned. I led the rebellion against John Major's government of Maastricht. Why? Very simply, it was about democracy, it was about European government, and it was about who governs the British people. So that's basically it. And we're still there. We've still got the same problem.
For you, I believe the main problem is what you see as a German dominance of the EU.
Yeah, I do. And as a matter of fact, I wrote about this in the book I wrote called Against the Federal Europe, which came out in 1991. And I said that the way I saw the construction of the European Treaty, the Maastricht Treaty, it would inevitably lead to a German Europe. And interestingly, I had a discussion with Helmut Schmidt. He asked me to go and see him in Hamburg. And I said, why do you want to see me? He said, because I think you're right. He said, I didn't want this. He said, I wanted a genuine European Union. He said, and I think that Germany is going to become increasingly powerful in it. And he went on to say that the only two groups of people in Europe who he didn't think were afraid of Germany were myself and my group in the House of Commons and our friends, and also the Russians.
Lord Liddle, do you think the UK is somehow being submerged on a European level?
I think that our EU membership has been of enormous benefit to us. We were the sick man of Europe in the 1970s. We've gained enormous economic benefits. The City of London has really prospered as the financial centre of the single market. And we've got lots of inward investment into Britain because we have access to the Europe single market. And in terms of our position in the world, all our friends, the United States, the Commonwealth, all want us to be in Europe because it's the seat at the table that the British Prime Minister has in the modern world. There aren't many others.
Indeed, I have read your opinion that the precondition for the relationship, ongoing relationship between the UK and the US, you believe, is with staying with the EU. Mr. Heydel-Mankoo, I get your opinion. How do you feel the UK's relationship with the rest of the world will really work out? You know, we're hearing from the Leave campaigners saying, well, hang on a minute, we're not stepping away completely from relationships with the EU. At the same time, it is, you know, the world's richest and biggest market.
It's the world's only declining market. I mean, our share of European trade has gone down over the last 10 years. And if you look at the last 10 years, China's economy has doubled. India's economy has doubled. This has been the only continent, apart from Antarctica, which hasn't had a growing economy. And I see no sense in shackling ourselves to this demographically ageing population in Europe, when actually, whenever anyone says that we're little Englanders, I say, no, they're little Europeans. We want to look outwardly to the rest of the world and to re-engage with the Commonwealth. This is the world's fastest growing market. And we have the common law, the English language, so much in common with our brothers and cousins around the world.
Why did you take notice of what the Commonwealth say? They want us to stay.
Nobody is denying that there are lots and lots of things which need to be sorted out. I'm just an optimist, and I say, you stay in, you seize control. Actually, that word the Brexiters use, take control. You seize control. Now you say, it's not going to work because they're not going to let us. But don't tell me there are not quite a lot of countries around in Europe now who do see things our way.
And indeed,
can I come in on that? Actually, my committee, I'm chairman of the European Committee, and we've just done a report on the lack of transparency within the Council of Ministers and the failures in the procedures, because actually most of the decisions are made behind closed doors in an organisation called the Committee of Permanent Representatives, and they're done by compromise. And actually they're nodded through, most of them, not all, but most of them are nodded through. We haven't won one single vote. What England, the United Kingdom has not won single vote.
Could I just give an example of how wrong that is? For instance,
my committee is wrong. Is that right?
Absolutely, because if you think about the great debate at the moment on TTIP. Right?
Indeed.
TTIP,
transatlantic trade.
If there is an agreement, it will have to be not just approved by the Council of Ministers, but by the European Parliament. And there will be a great open debate in the European Parliament about it. In Britain, the House of Commons will be lucky if it has a debate, never mind vote.
So for you, there is more transparency on that international level.
I don't want to develop this one. I think that Roger is wrong, because we've been examining the exact methodology that's been applied, and we have a lot of support from all the people who've studied these matters. But leave that aside. The real question on the single market, if we can come back to that, because that is seminal to this question. Does the single market work for the United Kingdom? Let me get this completely straight. We run a deficit with the other 27 member states of £68 billion a year. That's a lot of money. And the Germans, in the same goods and services, imports and exports, have a surplus with the same 27 of 82 billion. That can't be right for Britain.
The big question, though, is the services, because overall, over 40% of exports go to the EU.
I'm sorry, with great respect, it is goods and services, and these figures come from the House of Commons Library, and they come from the Office of National Statistics. Yes. There is no disputing them.
Well, we cover that deficit, I guess, by exporting elsewhere. Is that right?
No.
We make a surplus with the same goods and services with the rest of the world of 30 billion, and it's gone up by 8 billion this year alone. That's the trajectory. That's where we want to go.
But the single market doesn't cover services.
Isn't that a demonstration, Bill, that actually the German economy is actually very competitive, that our partners' economy are very competitive?
No, it doesn't. It shows that they've got control over the European Eurozone. They've got control over it.
No, but you can't have it both ways. You can't say, on the one hand, you're tying yourself to this corpse, and then on the other, look how competitive they are because so much they export to Britain. It's completely contradictory.
It isn't. Exactly the opposite. It's actually completely logical, and I'm talking about facts, and you can't deny them. On those figures I've given you, it's a disaster for the United Kingdom. Yes, we trade 44%.
So are you in favour of putting import controls on German imports?
I didn't say anything like that.
Well, how would you correct that deficit?
What do you see the future after Brexit?
Could I just say one other thing on that? That is that only yesterday, Mr. Kauber, the head of the German Federation of German Industries, said that there is no way that they would even contemplate attempting to do anything to restrict German goods into Britain or British goods into Germany.
But do you see a UK that has left the EU still being part of the single market then, or would you walk away entirely? Do you want a Norway as
Switzerland? It wouldn't be the single market. It would be something different.
Bilateral
because we're
trade
a very,
deals.
very large, we're the fifth largest economy in the world.
Is that not thanks to the EU?
Could I just come in with an interesting fact that I think that our car industry, if we're not part of the single market, will face a 10% tariff on all the stuff we sell into Europe. This is responsible for 750,000 jobs, particularly in the parts of the country I care about, like the north of England, like the Midlands.
Say 3 million jobs to go.
It's very simple. There's a European free trade zone from non-EU Iceland all the way through to non-EU Turkey. The only country not in that zone is Belarus. And who seriously thinks that we're going to be relegated to Belarusian status? And even worst case scenario, and we revert to WTO rules, even with that tariff put on, that would be more than nullified by how much we pay in every year as a net contributor to the EU.
Bill,
completely right.
Bill, I'd like to ask you, in my field.
Yes.
I'm not asking you to give any special preference to it, but will you not agree that there are some areas, like the environmental policy, where it has made sense to have a collective EU-wide approach?
I have to say that in respect of certain aspects of what I call the opportunities for parallel legislation, to have cooperation, and I've always been in favour of trade with Europe and also political cooperation.
And as a member of Europe, better on environment since you've joined?
I'm simply saying that in relation to certain types of environmental issues, there is a lot to be said for parallel legislation. But why the European Union should be exercising control over our water supplies when we're an island?
I guess it wasn't being done before.
The whole argument of the Leave people is that Britain will become more competitive by scrapping the regulations that the EU
forces.
Which regulations are going to scrap? The environmental regulations?
They cost 30 million.
Well, those are the environmental regulations you're talking about.
No, they're not.
Mr. Johnson, do you think that the UK government... I'd like the answer to this. The UK government, would it protect the environment as much? Like, surely the UK could take over.
I would argue, with great respect to whoever follows on June 24th, and assuming it's still a Conservative government, whatever. With great respect, I don't think a Brexit government would have the same kind of interest in environmental regulation, which, being part of the EU-wide, just take the question of air quality in London. Why is that going to go down? It's going to go down because, in the end, we will appeal to the European Court, and the European Court will issue its judgment.
So they've had a direct impact. Thanks to the EU rather than the British, the environment here is better.
Because you can rely on...
No, because the European Court, unfortunately, is a court which supersedes our laws.
It does.
And I'm talking about democracy in that building over there.
Well,
and when people vote in general elections, they vote for a government and they're entitled to have the laws that they voted for.
But that government is represented in the EU.
Bill, I don't think they're entitled to deal with international issues which are of concern, like air quality, like water quality.
Which goes cross borders.
But these are global issues, not European issues.
Environment crosses borders
I
in a
want to
way.
say something on Stanley's campaigns regarding water pollution and the rest of it. Yes, there is a lot to be said for good, clean water. The Thames, which are outside here, used to be filthy and so on. But that can be done just as well within the framework of the UK.
But the easy question is, would it be done?
It would, actually.
Well, by the way, can you see a Tory government post-Brexit?
Well, I can only refer back to the Water Resources Act of the 1960s, where we cleaned up the water without any reference to Europe whatsoever.
It's up to the British people to vote in a government who's environmentally friendly.
And they should, too.
Another topic I want to move on to, notably because we have Mr. Heydel-Mankoo here, your spokesperson for Poles for Britain, that's the Polish community that wants to leave. Immigration has been a massive part of this debate. Normally, from the Leave campaign, saying that it's uncontrolled, too many people arriving into the UK, and yet the UK isn't in Schengen. So is that really the EU's fault?
Absolutely. Well, no, there's still freedom to move across into the UK.
And that's what you want to stop. You want other Polish people not to be allowed. 500 million people have a British passport in terms of access to the UK. That's the reality. I mean, the Polish population has gone from 60,000 in 2001 to almost 800,000 in 2014.
I completely agree with them on this. I think the big problem on the Remain campaign is that we have not managed to get a real deal on migration. I think it's a huge mistake, and that should be, of course, not just for Britain. I would like to see a second paragraph in Article 45 of the treaty which says member states which have serious problems can introduce members.
So these reforms that David Cameron got put in place, he thinks that will reduce the number of EU migrations moving.
Cameron tried to get an emergency break, and he was told no way.
Yeah.
Well, he got that emergency break.
But look, this is part of the deal. What do you think will happen to the 2 million Brits who live on the continent?
Well,
Well,
they'll
less
have to
than
have visas.
1.2 million, not 2 million.
It's 2 million.
No, they're 1.2
2 million, but
And
if we are saying
there's established convention that they will have the right to remain, as Europeans living here will have the right to remain. This is a
Well,
complete red
there's a
herring.
question
thrown out
over
by-
that as
It's
well,
not a red
actually.
herring
The
at
vote's
all.
almost over.
They
No
will,
need
won't
to
they
keep
lose their
starting these-
won't they
this
lose their
nonsense.
In
entitlement
2 years
to
they
health
might.
on the
There's a
continent?
different health system, Roger. You know that.
But you have
No,
a
but
card
pensions
which
and health, there are a lot of Brits
continent.
abroad very, very
People will
worried.
lose
And
it.
indeed, EU
You're
workers
not
here
telling the truth.
that are worried.
You're trying to
There are-
disguise
no, I'm
that
not.
you are.
I'm not.
Because
I said there are
you-
different
You're
health
claiming there are
systems.
no
I
downsides
said
to our
to you just
leaving,
now that
and
there-
you're not prepared to
No,
acknowledge that
no,
there are some.
You would go down that route, Roger, because that's the way you are. But can I simply say this? It is not. It's a matter of analysis. I simply made the point, and it's true. There are different health systems, and that is the truth. And but it's not just about that. The issue about the whole of our European relationship is about democracy and who makes the laws, who governs us, and how. And it affects everything that we do. And there are 50% of all our laws are now made in the European Union.
There's a lot of questions about
Yeah.
that as
What
well.
about
Some say
but
13%,
aren't
some
there
say
some issues
60%.
on which we have to acknowledge we can't, through
21st
Westminster, we're interdependent with other countries on questions like refugees, migration, climate change,
For you,
trade with
Well,
China.
Roger, can I turn
Are you
the
not
argument?
close?
These are issues
Can
we
you forgive
can't
me?
decide
Roger,
for ourselves.
Let's
in
calm down a
practice.
bit and just let me ask you this question.
I'm not. You're the one who is full of argument.
Wait a minute. No, I'm suggesting to you that there is a very simple test that you can apply, and that is, why is it there are so many protests and riots all over Europe? Why is it that half the countries of Europe now want referendums? Why is it there is a minus 60? The Eurobarometer of democracy
Nationalism is
makes
rising,
it
but
quite
would that
clear.
not rise more if we didn't
That's
have
all
the
due
EU?
to the euro and to
Very
the
good
Schengen
point,
crisis.
if I may say so.
Sorry,
That-
it isn't due to the euro and the Schengen
But without
crisis.
the EU?
It is due to the challenges of competitiveness and migration that Europe faces.
It's the
We would
demographic
face
crisis.
those challenges whether or not you had the euro, whether or not you're in the EU, and it's better to tackle them together.
One thing we
EU's
talked
demographic
about
deficit.
economy, we're running out of
Okay,
time.
fine.
Economy, immigration,
Yeah, okay.
but Sir Cash, I mean,
Right,
you
far
notably, I wasn't even thinking about
Oh,
that.
sorry,
I was thinking
okay.
of your personal story because your father
of course.
actually died on D-Day.
Well, it wasn't D-Day. It was 2 weeks
That
later. He
year.
got the military cross against the Waffen SS Panzer Division, and
But-
actually,
but because
the
a lot
point
of the
is,
EU is about
where they were
peace.
fighting. No, they were fighting against fascism. They were fighting against.
Do you not think the EU has led to peace?
This is the biggest myth of all.
This is not the case. The position is that we got peace as a result of having, regrettably, to be involved in a very, very unpleasant war. But the reality was it was actually initiated by Germany at that time. Now, the bottom line is this, that we've now got a peaceful thing because of NATO, not because of the
Well, let's
EU.
ask Bill a question. Bill, say you had Britain out, and let's say you had the rest deciding they want to have a European army. We can't stop that. If we stay in, we could stop a European army.
Well, can I say, I believe very strongly that there will be a European army sooner or later.
Not if Britain's in.
Well, and Roger
Because
is slightly nodding his
Britain
head.
does
No,
a
I'm not
veto.
nodding my
Okay, fair
head.
enough. Well,
I
okay.
think this has been proposed in the past, and
Well-
there is no support for it in the European Union.
Well, as a matter of fact, that's not the
It's the
case.
policy
I
of
mean,
the
Mr.
German government
Juncker...
and
What
the
there is a
European
very
policy
strong
of the European
case.
army.
So what's
What
the
there is a
answer?
very
Hold on,
strong
hold on,
I-
hold on.
What-
What's
what's
the
the
answer to my
answer?
question?
Yes, the very simple point is that there is a very powerful move. I was in this meeting of all the national parliamentary chairmen only a month ago in The Hague, and we had Mr. Rutte there, we had the Defence Minister for Holland, we had all these people, and every one of them was saying, we've got to have a European army.
But
So
Mr. Johnson's
my
point
point
is,
how do
yeah.
if we're out, how do we stop
You can't
it?
veto it, and
by
is that
being
not more
out,
dangerous?
we are then able to prevent it, but it wouldn't be
By
just
going
for
to
that
war,
reason.
you
No,
mean?
no, don't predict.
What do
You can't vote
Stanley.
with it.
How do you present it by
The
going
position
out?
is that the way in which the voting system is being changed inexorably with the 5 presidents' reports and the rest of it, this drive for political union is all part of a momentum towards achieving a completely different kind of...
Bill,
Yeah.
tell us how we've stopped the European army by being out.
Well, I'm putting it
It's
the
an
other way
argument to a lot
around.
of questions. Don't we
I'm not
control by
saying
the
that-
inside?
I'm simply saying this. There is a potential veto, as indeed there is the case with Turkey. But on both issues, there is a very serious problem. It's called dynamics and momentum. And those countries that want it on the evidence over the last 25 years, sooner or later have got it. It's the same with the euro.
Very last word, Mr. Heydel-Mankoo.
Look, can we just expose this?
point.
Can we expose
Very
this
last
myth that the
word.
EU brings peace around? Right. For example, it's democracy and it's capitalism that ends fighting and wars. North America, South America haven't had a war. North America since the 1860s. South America since the 1940s.
Are you saying European Union made no difference
NATO has.
on French and German reconciliation?
No, there has been no wars between democracies since the Second World War. Anywhere in the world, democracies don't declare war. It's not the EU. And the one time that NATO gave the EU a chance to settle a war was Bosnia, and we saw what happened there.
Okay, well, I think we have, on that controversial note, we have run out of time for this half of the debate. We're going to take a quick break now to get the latest news. But thanks a lot to my guests in this half of the show, Mr. Stanley Johnson, Lord Roger Liddle, Sir Bill Cash, and Mr. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Thank you all for joining us. Time now for another news break.
Very
Good.
good. Lord. Yes,
Oh, congratulations.
The EU has 28 different nationalities. Here at France 24, we have even more.
From hours before the crack of the Parisian dawn, we're up and about to bring you the overnight world-breaking news.
En plus de ça, on prend de l'avance en vous parlant de l'actualité qui fera la une de vos journaux prochainement.
France 24, c'est 27 signaux satellites pour 180 pays dans le monde, en français, en anglais et en arabe.